North Fork, Wyoming Territory, 1878. The whistle of the locomotive pierced the crisp autumn air as the train slowed to a stop at North Fork Station. Raindrops had just begun to fall, casting a silvery veil over the small frontier town. Flynn Calloway tugged his hat lower against the drizzle and shifted his weight impatiently from one boot to the other. The 24-year-old rancher hadn't planned on being at the station today, but his sister's telegram had been urgent. Supplies needed collecting, no excuses. Flynn ran a hand through his thick chestnut hair, which curled slightly at the ends despite his best efforts to tame it. His broad shoulders strained against his wool jacket as he scanned the disembarking passengers, looking for the porter who would have his sister's package. That's when he saw her. She stepped hesitantly onto the platform, a young woman with amber-colored hair peeking from beneath a modest bonnet. Her forest green traveling dress, though slightly wrinkled from the journey, was of fine quality, and she clutched a small valise with white-knuckled fingers. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel that Flynn could see even from where he stood, darted anxiously around the station. North Fork, she murmured to herself, loud enough for Flynn to hear. This cannot be right. The young woman approached the station master, her posture straight despite her obvious distress. "Excuse me, sir. This is not Sweetwater, is it?" The old man shook his head. "No, miss. Sweetwater's another 40 miles west. Train won't be heading that way until tomorrow morning." Flynn watched as the color drained from her face. She bit her lower lip, a gesture that somehow made her look both vulnerable and determined at once. Is there an inn where I might stay the night?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight Eastern accent. "Miller's boarding house is your only option," the station master replied, "but it's full up with the cattle buyers in town." Flynn found himself stepping forward before he'd made a conscious decision to do so. "Pardon me," he said, removing his hat as his mother had taught him when addressing a lady. "Couldn't help overhearing. You're trying to reach Sweetwater." Her eyes met his, wary but desperate. "Yes, I was expected there today." Something about her hesitation intrigued Flynn. "I'm Flynn Calloway. My ranch is just outside town. My sister could offer you accommodation until tomorrow's train." The woman studied him with careful consideration. Flynn was suddenly aware of his appearance. Trailed dust on his boots despite his efforts to clean up, a day's worth of light stubble on his jaw. He stood a little straighter, grateful at least that he'd worn his newer jacket today. "That's very kind, Mr. Calloway, but I couldn't impose on strangers." She glanced around the nearly empty platform, clearly weighing her limited options. "It's no imposition. My sister would skin me alive if I left a lady stranded in this weather." Flynn smiled, and was rewarded with the slightest easing of her shoulders. After a moment's consideration, she extended her hand. "Ruby Thornton, I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Calloway." As he took her gloved hand, Flynn felt an unexpected spark of connection. Who was this refined young woman traveling alone to Sweetwater? And why did her eyes hold such a mixture of hope and trepidation? "My wagon's this way, Miss Thornton," he said, releasing her hand and gesturing toward the street. "If you'll allow me to collect my sister's package, we can be on our way before this drizzle becomes a downpour." Ruby nodded, following him with measured steps. "You mentioned a ranch?" "Calloway Ranch. Nothing grand, but we're building it up. My father started it, and now it's just my sister Ellie and me. We run cattle mostly, though Ellie's got notions about horse breeding that might just pay off." As they walked, Flynn couldn't help noticing how the other men on the platform watched Ruby. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that set her apart, clearly a lady of proper upbringing. What business could she have in a frontier town like Sweetwater? After collecting the package of medical supplies his sister had ordered, Flynn helped Ruby into the wagon and covered her valise with an oilcloth to protect it from the rain. As they set off down the muddy street, he caught her staring at the town's simple buildings with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "First time out west?" he asked. She nodded, securing her bonnet against a gust of wind. "Is it that obvious?" "Only in the way you look at everything, like you're memorizing it." Flynn guided the horses around a deep puddle. "Most folks who've been here a while stop noticing." "I've spent my life in Boston," she admitted. "Everything here is different." Flynn smiled. "Different doesn't always mean worse." "No," she agreed, meeting his eyes with surprising directness. "Just uncertain." The rain intensified as they left town, turning the dirt road to mud. Flynn's mind raced with questions about his mysterious passenger, but something in her demeanor suggested she wasn't ready to share her story. Instead, he pointed out landmarks as they traveled. Miller's Creek, where the fishing was good, the stand of aspens that turned golden in autumn, the distant mountains that marked the edge of Callaway land. "It's beautiful," Ruby said softly, watching raindrops create ripples and puddles beside the road. "Wilder than I imagined, but beautiful." "That it is," Flynn agreed, sneaking a glance at her profile. The same could be said of her, he thought. When they crested the final hill and the ranch house came into view, Flynn felt a surge of pride. The two-story wooden structure wasn't fancy, but it was solid and well-built, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the stone chimney. Several outbuildings and corrals surrounded it, and beyond stretched the pastures where his cattle grazed. "Home," he said simply. Ruby's eyes widened. "It's much larger than I expected. My father had ambitious dreams." Flynn's voice grew softer. "He didn't live to see them all realized, but Ellie and I do our best to build on what he started." As they approached the house, the front door flew open, and a young woman with the same chestnut hair as Flynn hurried onto the porch, her brow furrowed. "Flynn Calloway, where have you been? I've been worried sick with this storm coming in and—" Ellie stopped abruptly when she noticed Ruby. Her expression shifted from annoyance to surprise, and then to delight. "Oh, you've brought company." Flynn helped Ruby down from the wagon. "Ellie, this is Miss Ruby Thornton. She was meant to travel to Sweetwater, but got off at our station by mistake. The next train isn't until morning." Understanding dawned on Ellie's face. "Sweetwater? Were you perhaps traveling to meet Mr. Hammond?" Ruby's startled expression was confirmation enough. "Yes, how did you know?" Ellie and Flynn exchanged a look. "Nathaniel Hammond's advertisement for a mail-order bride has been the talk of the territory," Ellie explained gently. "He's the most prosperous rancher in Sweetwater." Flynn felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. Mail-order bride. Of course. A beautiful, refined woman like Ruby hadn't come west for adventure. She'd come to be married. "I see my situation is common knowledge," Ruby said, her cheeks flushing. "How mortifying." "Not at all," Ellie assured her, taking her arm. "Come inside before you catch your death in this rain. Flynn, take care of the horses and bring in Miss Thornton's valise." As the women disappeared into the house, Flynn stood motionless in the rain for a moment. Why should the revelation that Ruby was promised to another man affect him so? He'd known her less than an hour. Yet something about the thought of her marrying Hammond, a man 30 years her senior, if rumors were true, left a bitter taste in his mouth. Inside, after changing into dry clothes, Flynn found Ruby seated at the kitchen table with Ellie, both cradling cups of hot tea. Ruby had removed her bonnet, revealing the full glory of her amber hair, which fell in soft waves past her shoulders. Her traveling dress had been exchanged for one of Ellie's simple day dresses, slightly too large, but serviceable. "There you are," Ellie said brightly. "I've explained to Miss Thornton that we're happy to host her until tomorrow's train. I've made up the spare room." "Thank you," Ruby said, her eyes meeting Flynn's with genuine gratitude. "Your kindness to a stranger is overwhelming." "We were all strangers once out here," Flynn replied, taking a seat across from her. "Besides, my mother would haunt me if I left a lady stranded. Miss Thornton was just telling me about her correspondence with Mr. Hammond," Ellie continued, giving Flynn a meaningful look he couldn't quite decipher. Ruby's fingers tightened around her teacup. Mr. Hammond's letters painted Sweetwater as a promising community. He described his ranch as a place where one might build a good life. "Hammond's Circle H is certainly prosperous," Flynn acknowledged reluctantly. "One of the largest spreads in the territory." "Have you met him?" Ruby asked, watching Flynn carefully. Flynn hesitated, aware of Ellie's warning glance. "Once or twice at cattle auctions. He's well-established." "Flynn," Ellie chided, "don't be diplomatic. Miss Thornton deserves honesty." She turned to Ruby. "Mr. Hammond is wealthy, yes, but he's also known for his difficult temperament. 3 ranch foremen in the past year alone have quit his employ." Ruby's expression remained composed, but Flynn noticed her knuckles whitening around the teacup. "I appreciate your candor," she said quietly. "Though I must admit, it's not entirely unexpected." "What do you mean?" Flynn asked. Ruby set down her cup with deliberate care. "When one agrees to marry a stranger based on a few carefully written letters, one must be prepared for discrepancies between correspondence and reality. The resignation in her voice bothered Flynn more than it should have. "Why did you answer his advertisement?" he asked, earning another glare from Ellie for his directness. But Ruby didn't seem offended. Instead, she met his gaze squarely. "My father was a professor at Harvard. When he died last winter, he left substantial debts. My mother and younger sisters had few options. Mr. Hammond's proposal included a generous settlement that would secure my family's comfort." Her matter-of-fact explanation hung in the air between them. Flynn's admiration for her courage grew, even as his unease about her future deepened. "That's very selfless of you," Ellie said gently. Ruby smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Is it selfless to secure one's own future as well? Mr. Hammond promised security, respect, and a comfortable home. Many women marry for less." The conversation was interrupted by a violent gust of wind that rattled the windows. Ellie rose to her feet. "That storm's picking up faster than I thought. Flynn, we should check on the new calves in the north pasture. They're still weak from that fever." She turned to Ruby. "Will you be comfortable here for an hour or so? The kitchen is well stocked if you get hungry." "Of course," Ruby assured them. "Please don't worry about me." Outside, as they saddled their horses in the barn, Ellie finally spoke her mind. "She's much too fine for old Hammond." Flynn tightened his saddle girth with more force than necessary. "It's none of our business, Ellie, isn't it? You've been staring at her like a man dying of thirst looks at water." "That's ridiculous," Flynn protested, though he knew his sister saw through him as always. "I'm just concerned. Hammond has a reputation for drinking and temper," Ellie agreed soberly. "And that poor girl is traveling across the country to marry him, thinking she's securing her family's future." Flynn mounted his horse, his jaw tight. "Like she said, it's her choice." Ellie swung into her saddle with practiced ease. "Sometimes circumstances make choices for us. Doesn't mean we have to like them." As they rode through the increasing storm to check on the vulnerable calves, Flynn couldn't shake the image of Ruby's resigned expression. A woman like her deserved better than a loveless marriage of convenience to a man old enough to be her father. But what right did he have to interfere? Meanwhile, back at the ranch house, Ruby stood at the window watching the storm intensify. Lightning illuminated the rugged landscape in brief, electric flashes. So different from Boston's crowded streets and brick buildings. So wild and vast and unpredictable, much like the future she had chosen. She withdrew from her pocket the well-worn letter she'd read countless times during her journey west. Nathaniel Hammond's handwriting was precise and formal, much like his proposed arrangement. A business transaction, thinly disguised as courtship. She would bring refinement and social standing to his household. He would provide financial security for her impoverished family. A fair exchange, she had told herself. Yet standing in this warm, modest ranch house, seeing how the Calloways treated each other with affection and respect, Ruby felt the first genuine doubt about her decision. When Flynn and Ellie returned, soaked and mud-splattered but triumphant after moving the vulnerable calves to shelter, Ruby had prepared a simple stew from the ingredients she'd found in the kitchen. The surprised pleasure on Flynn's face when he discovered she'd cooked dinner gave her an unexpected feeling of satisfaction. "You didn't have to do this," he said, hanging his dripping coat by the door. "I wanted to repay your kindness somehow," Ruby replied. "Though I must confess, cooking on a wood stove was more challenging than I anticipated." Ellie laughed. "You've never used a wood stove before?" "Our cook in Boston would have been horrified at the suggestion," Ruby admitted with a small smile. "But I watched carefully and followed the recipe in your mother's book." The mention of their mother created a moment of silence, broken when Flynn said quietly, "She would have been pleased to see her recipes still in use." During dinner, as the wind howled outside, the conversation flowed more easily than Ruby had expected. The Calloways shared stories of ranch life, the challenges of last winter's heavy snow, their hopes for expanding their herd, the ongoing dispute with a neighbor over water rights. Ruby found herself drawn into their world, offering suggestions from books she'd read and asking questions that revealed her quick intelligence. "You know a great deal about agricultural techniques for a city woman," Flynn observed when she mentioned crop rotation. "My father believed women should be educated in practical matters as well as social graces," Ruby explained. "He encouraged me to read widely." "He sounds like a wise man," Flynn said. "He was. which makes it all the more painful that his poor business decisions left us destitute. Ruby looked down at her plate. He trusted the wrong people. Later, as Ellie showed Ruby to the spare bedroom, the younger woman hesitated in the doorway. Ruby, may I speak frankly? Of course. You don't have to go through with this marriage if you have doubts. There are other ways to make a life out here. Ruby's expression softened. That's very kind. But my family is depending on me. The arrangement with Mr. Hammond includes an immediate payment that's already been sent to my mother. I see. Ellie looked troubled. Just know that if you ever need help, you have friends here. Friends. Such a simple word, yet it nearly brought tears to Ruby's eyes. Thank you, Ellie. That means more than you know. That night, as the storm raged outside, Ruby lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the country night punctuated by thunder. In Boston, she'd been surrounded by the noise of the city. Here, the silence between thunderclaps felt vast and meaningful, like the space between heartbeats. Her thoughts turned to Flynn Calloway. His kindness was unexpected, as was the strange connection she felt toward him. He was nothing like the sophisticated Boston men she'd known. There was an authenticity to him that was both disarming and compelling. His strong hands were calloused from work, his face tanned from days in the sun, yet his manners were impeccable, and his eyes reflected an intelligence that matched her own. Ruby turned restlessly in the unfamiliar bed. Such thoughts were dangerous and pointless. By this time tomorrow, she would be in Sweetwater, meeting her future husband. Flynn Calloway would be nothing more than a brief, pleasant memory of Western hospitality. The next morning dawned clear and brilliant, the storm having washed the world clean. But as Ruby joined the Calloways for breakfast, a new complication arose. I've just come from town, said Ben, the Calloways' ranch hand, who had arrived with supplies. Station master says the bridge at Miller's Creek washed out in the storm. No trains running until they repair it. How long will that take? Ruby asked, trying to keep the panic from her voice. 3 days at least, he reckons. Flynn watched the color drain from Ruby's face. Mr. Hammond is expecting me today. He'll be at the station. I can ride to Sweetwater and explain what happened, Flynn offered. It's only a few hours on horseback if you know the trails. Would you? I could write a note. Of course. I'll leave after breakfast. Ellie gave her brother a searching look, but said nothing. After Flynn departed with Ruby's carefully composed letter, Ellie suggested they make use of the fine weather to do laundry. Your traveling clothes could use refreshing before you meet your intended, she said practically. As they worked together hanging sheets on the line, Ruby found herself enjoying the simple domestic task. The Wyoming sunshine was different from that in Boston, clearer, sharper somehow, casting everything in vivid detail. Have you lived here all your life? Ruby asked, pinning a pillowcase to the line. Born and raised, Ellie confirmed. Though I did spend 2 years at school in Denver. Pa insisted I get a proper education, even if I was coming back to ranch life. Do you ever wish for something different? Something more conventional for a woman? Ellie considered this as she smoothed a wrinkle from a sheet. Sometimes, especially when Flynn's being stubborn about the ranch accounts. She smiled. But I love this land. It gets into your blood. And here, I'm free to be myself in ways I never could be in a city drawing room. Ruby thought about Ellie's words as they continued their chores. Freedom, not a concept she'd associated with her decision to become a mail-order bride. Security, yes. Duty, certainly. But freedom? Later that afternoon, Flynn returned from Sweetwater, his expression unreadable as he dismounted in the yard. Ruby hurried out to meet him, anxiety evident in her posture. Was Mr. Hammond very upset? Flynn removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't there. What? According to his foreman, Hammond left for Cheyenne 2 days ago on business. Won't be back until the end of the week. Ruby blinked in surprise. He knew I was arriving today. Apparently something more important came up, Flynn said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. His foreman seemed embarrassed about it. Said Hammond left instructions to make you comfortable at the Circle H until his return. I see. Ruby's voice was steady, but Flynn noticed her hands trembling slightly. I told him you'd stay here until the trains are running again, then make your own decision. Flynn hesitated. I hope that was all right. Yes, thank you. Ruby turned away, but not before Flynn caught the hurt in her eyes. That evening, as Ruby helped Ellie prepare dinner, Flynn watched them from the doorway. The two women worked together as if they'd known each other for years rather than a day, their movements complementary and efficient. Ruby had rolled up her sleeves and tied one of Ellie's aprons around her waist, looking more at home in the ranch kitchen than Flynn would have thought possible for a Boston socialite. "The biscuits need more flour," Ruby was saying. "The dough is too sticky." "You're right," Ellie agreed. "Ma always said I was too impatient with biscuits." Ruby added more flour, her hands working the dough with surprising confidence. "My mother believed a lady should understand cooking even if she never had to do it herself. Always know how your household should be run," she used to say. "Wise woman," Flynn commented, making his presence known. Ruby looked up, a smudge of flour on her cheek that Flynn found inexplicably endearing. "In theory, perhaps, though I doubt she ever imagined I'd be putting those lessons to use in a Wyoming ranch kitchen." "Life has a way of surprising us," Flynn said, their eyes holding for a moment too long. Ellie cleared her throat. "Flynn, make yourself useful and set the table." Over dinner, Flynn shared more details about his visit to Sweetwater. "Hammond's ranch is impressive," he admitted reluctantly. "3 times the size of ours, with a new 2-story house built just last year." "How many people work there?" Ruby asked. "A dozen hands, at least, plus a housekeeper and cook." Ruby nodded, absorbing this information. "And the town itself?" "Growing fast. They've got a proper hotel now, 2 saloons, a church, even a small school." Flynn hesitated. "It's a good community, overall." Despite Mr. Hammond's apparent forgetfulness about his bride's arrival, Ellie muttered. "Ellie," Flynn warned. "It's all right," Ruby said. "I appreciate honesty. And it is concerning that he would leave when expecting me. Perhaps there was an emergency." The doubt in her voice was evident. Flynn wanted to tell her that Hammond's emergency had likely involved a high-stakes poker game in Cheyenne, a detail the foreman had reluctantly shared after Flynn pressed him. But he held his tongue. That revelation would only hurt Ruby more. The next 2 days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Ruby insisted on making herself useful, helping with household chores, and even learning to collect eggs from the chicken coop without fear. Each evening, she joined Flynn and Ellie on the porch to watch the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and crimson. On the 3rd day, as Ruby helped Flynn mend a tear in one of the horse blankets, she found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. "Why haven't you married, Flynn? A successful rancher like yourself must have had opportunities." Flynn's hands stilled on the heavy needle. "There was someone once. Margaret Davis. We were practically engaged. What happened? Winter of '76 was brutal. Her family's farm failed, and they moved back east." Flynn resumed his stitching. "She wrote for a while, but eventually the letters stopped. I heard she married a shopkeeper in Philadelphia." "I'm sorry," Ruby said softly. Flynn shrugged. "It was for the best. She wasn't cut out for ranch life, too afraid of the hardships. Better to learn that before marriage than after." "Is that why you've remained single? Waiting for someone who isn't afraid of hardship?" Flynn looked up, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "I suppose I'm waiting for someone who sees the beauty in this life, not just its challenges. Someone who belongs here." The weight of his words hung between them, full of unspoken meaning. Ruby was the first to look away. "Belonging is a powerful thing," she murmured, returning her attention to the blanket in her lap. That evening, a rider arrived from town with news that the bridge repairs were complete. Trains would resume normal service the next morning. "I'll take you to the station," Flynn offered, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you." Ruby's response was equally measured, betraying none of the tumult she felt. Later, standing alone on the porch under a canopy of stars more brilliant than any she'd seen in Boston, Ruby faced the decision she'd been avoiding. Tomorrow she would board a train to Sweetwater, to a man who couldn't be bothered to meet her as promised. She would fulfill her obligation, secure her family's financial future, and build a life as Mrs. Nathaniel Hammond. Yet something had changed in these few days at Calloway Ranch. She'd glimpsed a different possibility, a life built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than financial arrangement. The way Flynn looked at her when he thought she wouldn't notice stirred emotions she hadn't expected to find in this practical arrangement. Ruby was so lost in thought she didn't hear Flynn approach until he spoke. "Penny for your thoughts?" She startled slightly. "I'm not sure they're worth that much." Flynn leaned against the porch railing beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. I've been thinking, he said after a moment, about wrong turns. Wrong turns. Sometimes what seems like a mistake, like getting off at the wrong train station, turns out to be exactly where you needed to be. Ruby's heart quickened at his words. That's a rather philosophical view for a rancher. We have a lot of time to think out here. Flynn turned to face her. Ruby, I know we've only known each other a few days, but I feel— Please don't, she interrupted, voice tight with emotion. I have obligations that can't be undone with fine sentiments. Even if those obligations lead you to unhappiness, Hammond doesn't deserve you. He couldn't even be bothered to meet his bride. And what would you have me do instead? Ruby challenged. Break my word. Leave my family to financial ruin. There are other solutions we could find together, Flynn insisted. We? There is no we, Flynn. There can't be. Ruby wrapped her arms around herself. I'm grateful for your hospitality, but tomorrow I'll go to Sweetwater as planned. Flynn's jaw tightened, but he nodded. As you wish. I won't mention it again. He left her alone on the porch, the vast Wyoming night suddenly feeling colder and emptier than before. The next morning, breakfast was a silent affair. Ellie tried to maintain conversation, but neither Flynn nor Ruby seemed inclined to participate. As they prepared to leave for the station, Ellie embraced Ruby warmly. Remember what I said. You always have friends here. Thank you, Ruby whispered, fighting unexpected tears. The journey to town was tense with unspoken words. Flynn stared straight ahead, his profile set in determined lines. Ruby sat beside him clutching her valise, wondering why doing the right thing felt so wrong. As they approached the station, they saw a commotion on the platform. A well-dressed older man was berating the station master, his voice carrying even over the noise of the waiting train. Incompetent fools. I send explicit instructions, and yet, that's Hammond, Flynn said quietly. Ruby studied her intended husband from a distance. Nathaniel Hammond was tall and imposing, his silver hair and beard neatly trimmed, his clothes expensive. He looked exactly as his letters had described, a man of means and authority. Yet the way he spoke to the station master made her stomach tighten with apprehension. Flynn helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist for a moment longer than necessary. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice low and urgent. I do, Ruby replied, though with less conviction than before. They approached the platform together. When Hammond spotted them, his expression shifted from anger to calculation. Ah, there you are. Miss Thornton, I presume. Hammond extended his hand, ignoring Flynn completely. Nathaniel Hammond. I apologize for the confusion. I was informed of your delayed arrival and came immediately from Cheyenne to meet you. Ruby placed her hand in his, noting the coldness of his grip compared to Flynn's warmth. Mr. Hammond. Yes, there was an unfortunate misunderstanding with the train stops. So I gathered. Fortunately, it's resolved now. Hammond's eyes assessed her with a proprietorial gaze that made Ruby feel like livestock at auction. You're younger than I expected. That's good. I require someone with energy to manage my household. Flynn stiffened beside her, and Ruby feared what he might say. She quickly intervened. Mr. Calloway and his sister were kind enough to offer me accommodation during the delay. I'm deeply grateful for their hospitality. Hammond finally acknowledged Flynn with a dismissive nod. Calloway, your family runs that small spread north of town, don't you? Very quaint. We manage, Flynn replied evenly, though Ruby could sense his restraint. The train whistle blew, signaling the imminent departure. We should board, Hammond said, taking Ruby's valise from her. I've arranged for us to be married tomorrow morning by the preacher in Sweetwater. No sense in delay, is there? The sooner you're settled in your new role, the better. Ruby felt a chill at his matter-of-fact tone. No warmth, no affection, just business, as she'd always known it would be. Yet somehow, after her days with the Calloways, the reality seemed starker than she'd imagined. I'll need to get my trunk, she said, stalling for time. I've already arranged for it to be delivered to the Circle H. Hammond checked his pocket watch. 2 minutes, Miss Thornton. Say your goodbyes quickly. He strode toward the train, leaving Ruby alone with Flynn. Ruby, Flynn began, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for everything, she said formally, extending her hand. Please convey my gratitude to Ellie as well. Flynn took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he turned it over and pressed something into her palm. If you ever need me, for any reason, send word. I'll come. Ruby looked down to find a small carved wooden horse in her palm. Flynn, all aboard, the conductor called. Miss Thornton. Hammond's voice cut through the station noise. The train won't wait. Ruby closed her fingers around the carving, an unexpected sob catching in her throat. Then, without another word, she turned and hurried toward the train. Flynn watched as Hammond ushered her aboard, one proprietary hand at the small of her back. The older man didn't look back, but just before she entered the carriage, Ruby turned. Their eyes met across the platform, hers full of regret, his of unspoken feelings. Then she was gone, and the train began to pull away from the station. Flynn stood motionless until the train disappeared around the bend. Only then did he return to his wagon, his jaw set in determination. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. In Sweetwater that evening, Ruby sat alone in her hotel room, the wooden carving clutched in her hand like a talisman. Dinner with Hammond had been a stilted affair, his conversation revolving entirely around his expectations for their marriage. He had been coldly polite, treating her less like a future wife and more like a newly hired employee. You'll be responsible for the household accounts, social engagements, and ensuring my comfort, he had informed her over dessert. I expect the house to run smoothly. My first wife was skilled at managing such matters before her unfortunate passing. And what of affection in our marriage? Ruby had dared to ask. Hammond had looked almost amused. My dear, at my age, comfort and respectability are more valuable than romantic sentiments. I'll provide generously for you, as agreed. In return, you'll bring youth and refinement to my home. It's a fair arrangement. Fair. The same word Ruby had used to justify her decision. Yet after experiencing the warmth and genuine connection at the Calloway ranch, fair suddenly seemed inadequate compensation for a lifetime without love. A knock at her door startled Ruby from her thoughts. She quickly tucked Flynn's carving into her pocket before opening it, expecting Hammond with some forgotten instruction about tomorrow's ceremony. Instead, she found Ellie Calloway, windblown and determined. Ellie, what are you doing here? May I come in? Quickly, before someone sees me. Ruby ushered her inside, bewildered. How did you find me? Sweetwater isn't that big, and the hotel clerk is an old friend. Ellie removed her riding gloves. I don't have much time. Flynn doesn't know I'm here. He'd have tried to stop me if he did. Why are you here? Ruby asked, though something in her heart already knew. Because you're making a terrible mistake. Ellie's directness was startling, and my brother is too honorable to interfere. Ellie, I appreciate your concern, but let me finish. While in town today, Flynn learned something about Hammond that changes everything. Ellie lowered her voice. The settlement Hammond promised your family? He never sent it. Ruby felt the blood drain from her face. What? But his letters specifically said he lied. Ellie's expression was compassionate but firm. Flynn spoke with the bank manager. Hammond withdrew a large sum last week, but it wasn't for any settlement. It was to cover gambling debts in Cheyenne. That's why he wasn't here to meet me, Ruby whispered, the pieces falling into place. Yes, and there's more. His first wife didn't die of illness as he claims. She left him after years of neglect and cruelty. Returned east to her family. Ruby sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind reeling. How could I have been so blind? You weren't blind. You were doing what you thought necessary to save your family. Ellie sat beside her, taking her hands. But now you have a choice. A real choice. What choice? If Hammond hasn't sent the money, my family is still in financial distress. Flynn has a proposal, a business proposal, Ellie clarified. He needs a partner in the ranch, someone with education and intelligence to help expand the operation. He's willing to offer your family the same settlement Hammond promised, in exchange for your partnership. Partnership? Ruby repeated, scarcely believing what she was hearing. Legal, binding partnership in Calloway Ranch. Your name on the deed alongside ours. Ellie squeezed her hands. It's not charity, Ruby. We genuinely need someone with your abilities. And if, in time, that partnership becomes something more between you and my brother, well, that would be between the two of you. Ruby's mind raced with implications. Hammond will be furious. Let him be. He has no legal claim on you. You haven't married yet. Ellie stood. The morning stage to North Fork leaves at 6. Flynn will be waiting at our station, if you decide to come. With that, Ellie slipped out of the room, leaving Ruby alone with the most important decision of her life. Dawn found Ruby at the Sweetwater stage depot. A hastily pinned letter for Hammond left at the hotel desk. The letter explained her discovery of his deception and her release from any obligation to him. She had reclaimed her trunk from the Circle H and paid extra to have it loaded onto the stage. As the coach rattled along the rough road toward North Fork, Ruby clutched Flynn's wooden carving in her palm. Doubt and fear still plagued her. Was she making another mistake? Trading one arrangement for another? But something told her this decision was different. This time, she was choosing not just security but possibility. Not just obligation, but hope. When the stage finally pulled into North Fork Station, Ruby's heart pounded painfully against her ribs. What if Flynn had changed his mind? What if Ellie had misunderstood his intentions? She stepped down from the coach, scanning the platform anxiously. At first, she didn't see him. Then the crowd parted, and there he stood, hatless, his chestnut hair ruffled by the breeze, his blue eyes finding hers across the distance. For a moment, neither moved. Then Flynn strode forward, stopping just short of where she stood. "You came back," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Ellie said you had a business proposal," Ruby replied, struggling to maintain composure. A smile tugged at the corner of Flynn's mouth. "Is that why you're here? For business?" Ruby met his gaze directly. "No, I'm here because getting off at the wrong station was the most fortunate mistake of my life." Flynn closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "It wasn't a mistake, Ruby. It was fate." "I don't believe in fate," she whispered, though her heart argued otherwise. "Then call it luck, or providence, or simple good fortune." Flynn's eyes searched hers. "All I know is that the moment you stepped onto this platform, something changed." "I changed. I have nothing to offer but myself," Ruby said. "My education, my determination. That's everything," Flynn assured her. "The partnership Ellie mentioned is real. I want you to be part of Calloway Ranch, legally and formally. As for the settlement for your family, that's real too. I've already telegraphed the funds to your mother." Ruby's eyes widened. "How could you afford such a sum?" "I sold the south parcel, land I've been holding for expansion. It was a fair price." Flynn's expression grew serious. "But I need you to understand something. The partnership is yours regardless of anything else that might develop between us. You're free to build your life as you choose." Tears welled in Ruby's eyes at his thoughtfulness, at the respect inherent in his offer. "And what life would you choose for us, Flynn Calloway?" "One we build together, day by day." He reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "One that starts with friendship and respect, and grows into something neither of us could create alone." "That sounds like a marriage proposal," Ruby said softly. "Not yet," Flynn smiled. "But someday, when you're ready, when you're certain, I hope to offer one. And I hope you'll accept for no other reason than love." Ruby felt the last of her reservations dissolve. Standing on the same platform where they'd first met, she realized she had finally found what she'd never thought to seek. Not just security or duty, but partnership. Not just a husband, but a man who saw her worth beyond what she could provide. "I'd like to go home now," she said, her heart full. "To Calloway Ranch." Flynn's smile brightened his entire face. "Home," he repeated, the word a promise. "Let's go home." 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Ruby Thornton became Ruby Calloway in a simple ceremony on the porch of the ranch house. Her mother and sisters had traveled from Boston for the occasion, marveling at the woman Ruby had become, confident, capable, and radiantly happy. The partnership had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Ruby's education and business acumen had already expanded the ranch's operations, while Flynn's practical knowledge and hard work had implemented her ideas. Together, they were building something neither could have created alone. As they exchanged vows beneath an arch of wildflowers Ellie had gathered from the hills, Ruby thought about the seemingly wrong turn that had brought her to this moment. One mistaken train stop had changed the course of her life, leading her not just to a husband, but to a partner, not just to security, but to love. When Flynn kissed her as his wife for the first time, Ruby knew with absolute certainty that she had stepped off at exactly the right station after all.